Civil War. So we have this story from MSN.com. U.S. Civil War concerns on the rise, according to study. We've actually had a bunch of stories bubbling up over Civil War, and we periodically do talk about this. We have this article. This is fairly old, however, but I bring this up because we have from CBS News: attempted assassination of Donald Trump spurred a huge spike in calls for violence and civil war online. This, of course, is from today. And then this story about the U.S. Civil War concerns on the rise, according to study. So my concern is when we're looking at Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, with no policy positions, and you have, according to polls and the prediction markets, Kamala Harris is on track to win. The prediction markets say she's going to win the swing states. I'm sorry, the betting markets. And the polls say that she's going to win as well. She's ahead in the general. What happens when half the population of a country does not care at all about policies, laws, and plans? They care only to hate the other side.
Well, and their feelings. They care about their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I mean.
Yeah.
They hate.
Yeah.
They hate Trump. They don't care what he stands for. They don't care what he's done. They hate Trump's supporters. They don't care what they stand for. They don't care what they've done. Mm-hmm. They're not going to give you any real answers. They're going to say whatever they can to maintain the facade that they are right and the people they hate are wrong. And so one thing I will say about the CBS News article is they are wrong. No one's calling. Well, people are calling for violence for sure. The left in response to Trump's near assassination.
I was going to say all of those riots that broke off after the attempted assassination of Trump. Oh, wait, there weren't any.
Right. But no one's calling for civil war in general. What's happening is people are saying they fear a civil war because of what's happening.
But they fear a civil war that from people who don't go out and protest, which is really the weird thing. Like, the only reason that they can keep slamming January 6th is because that's the last time conservatives went out to protest. And it was the first time in a long time as well. Conservatives went out to protest.
Only time.
Yeah, I mean, conservatives went out to protest in the early days of COVID with the lockdowns when their businesses were getting closed and they couldn't make payroll. And then they went out to protest on January 6th. So it was interesting. Recently, Trump was asked about, January 6th, attack on the Capitol. And he said, there was an attack on the Capitol last week. They vandalized all these statues. They refused to clear out. They were being violent and fighting with cops or whatever else.
Yep.
And why aren't you guys covering that? And they don't cover that because the Democrats just always go out and protest and are violent thugs and whatever else. Like the Antifa journalist who was arrested for anti-Semitic graffiti against the board members of the Brooklyn Museum. And of course, the Brooklyn Museum is where there were 10,000 Black Trans Lives activists in June 2020 standing out there, demanding whatever, that they not be checked and that they not be COVID tested, and saying that they get to be out there because this is a public health crisis and all of the other stuff.
We talked about this the other night with Nick Freitas. And this is, I believe it was mostly on the members only portion, because someone asked us what would happen to foreign military bases in the event of a civil war if it did happen.
That was a fascinating question.
And of course, as soon as you mentioned that, Nick, who actually has real military experience, special forces, he has, I would argue, more correct opinions than I would as someone who just reads the news. Of course, I still have my opinions. So we both kind of got into it and entertained the possibilities. I think the bigger question is the conversation around civil war. People like to say, when I did that, I forgot what the show was called. It was, what was it, Face Off or something? I don't know. Michael Knowles and I did a quiz show on Civil War, and they said I have the world record for saying the word Civil War the most times on a podcast, and it's good. But the reality is, the media talks about it quite a bit all the time, and we on this show, we don't bring up every instance of when the media says Civil War is coming. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was like, it's been a long time. Why don't we pull this up? But following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, it was trending on X. People saying that we were millimeters away from a civil war. So my concern now is looking at how I'm watching the speech from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and people are behind her just cheering and nodding and going, yes, yes, as she says nothing.
No, nothing.
In the event that she does win, and the policies they begin to enact are, I don't know, like World War III-esque policies. Are red states just going to go along with and agree with this stuff, especially when it's become overtly illogical? Or more importantly, when we begin to see things like Oklahoma, for instance, banning abortion, and Colorado unrestricting it to the point of birth. Like these hyper-polarized worldviews on policy. When Kamala Harris signs an executive order saying abortion is now legal to the point of birth, and she cites some dubious justification for it, then Planned Parenthood tries operating in a red state that's banned abortion. What happens? Does the state government then come in? Do the feds come in and intervene? I'm not saying I know for sure Kamala Harris will try to do anything like that, but I think it's likely.
Well, you've
Look at
already
DACA.
seen, and you've already seen the Fed coming in to intervene in states that have restricted abortion, access, and that have restricted transitioning children and other things like that. You've seen the DOJ going after those states and bringing suit. That's why it was so interesting. I think it was in June that there was a report out saying that the Harris-Biden administration, as I'm now going to call it because it's clear that Kamala was never in charge, you could see they came out and said that they were opposed to sex changes for minors. But at the same time as they said they were opposed to sex changes for minors, they are literally suing the state of Tennessee for banning sex changes for minors. So what is it that you really think there, Harris-Biden? And while you're at it, what is a woman? Miss Kamala Harris.
I because you brought it up, I do need to give a shout out to George Alexopoulos at GPrime85. You guys should follow him on Instagram and X because he made this comment a long time. He made this comic a long time ago. It's a real quote from Joe Biden. He said, "It is estimated that 200 million people will die by the time I finish this talk." He actually said that. I think what he meant to say was too many people will have died. But you'll notice the sign in front of him says Harris Biden. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that, instantly reminded me of this. Now, shout out to GPrime85 because for those that aren't watching, I'm going to describe it to you. So he literally did say this. Okay, he meant to say will have died, not will die. And then in the comic, the next panel is him with glowing red eyes saying, "And that time," and the next one he says is now, and then he blasts lightning out of his hand and is vaporizing a crowd of people in front of him with lightning powers. And it's just we had this hanging up in the other studio. It's one of my favorite comics he's made. But this is back in 2020, and it says Harris Biden, and it also says Valar Morghulis.
Amazing. Do you think that we're already at civil war?
Civil strife.
Civil strife?
Yeah, so, and it's funny because I only learned this a couple of years ago. I've talked about the fear of a civil war for a long time. And the error I've probably made is saying, we're in a cold civil war, we're in some kind of civil war. And then when I spoke with Stephen Marsh, who's a journalist, he's a bit of a lefty guy. But we basically agree on most of these things. Now, he thinks the right is fomenting civil war, which is silly nonsense because they don't do anything. However, he brought up the concept of civil strife to me. And he said this is a period pre-Civil War that is defined by political tumult, violence, etc. And academics across the aisle do believe that today we are in civil strife. There have been many periods of civil strife that have not led to civil war, but this is the period before a civil war begins. So if Donald Trump gets elected and then has some minor reforms, some people get arrested, everyone starts calming down. He gets rid of wokeness he makes it illegal basically to discriminate on the basis of race at the federal level. Like he actually did this in his first term. And then Democrats are in disarray. If we get 2 more terms of a conservative anti-woke president and industries start realigning, you avert a civil war. However, if Trump or Kamala wins and both sides just continue the hyperpolarization, then I don't see how it's avoided. Right. So just to go back to 1861, not that I think this represents where we currently are today, but, history rhymes. You have Bleeding Kansas, this period for 7 years, I believe it was, starting in the 1850s, where Kansas as a new territory, there was fights between people who wanted a free state or a slave state, literally murdering each other. John Brown famously was there with his kids, and he straight up just killing people. The Civil War starts, and no one really talks about Kansas at all. No one cares about what happened. Like, do we even know? I mean, if you read the history books, it's amazing to be like, dude, there were battles. People were killing each other in this place. And so I don't know exactly how we get something similar this time around because of the way the states are. But what I do see as interesting is the violence and the tumult was there. Of the states that seceded from the Union, Abraham Lincoln got not a single vote. Of the original states, of the 7 original states that seceded from the Union, there was not a single vote cast for Abraham Lincoln. because the South said that, they feared he was going to abolish slavery. His official position was to stop its expansion, but they thought that was BS. So that means, there was a period where in this country, before a secession happened, states already rejected the president. Not a single vote cast for them. Ballots weren't issued. Ballots were issued by parties privately, but no, the Republicans didn't operate in any of these states. They thought it was pointless. And so with that violence and with that level of hatred towards the president, Abraham Lincoln gets elected. And then before he's inaugurated, it was in March back then, not January, because they changed it, 7 states secede from the Union. I don't know that we would see something like that happen today because the alignment is different. That being said, it's possible that Trump gets elected, and then in December, there's a constitutional crisis, which results in several blue states arguing that they will not abide by executive action or orders under Donald Trump. Donald Trump gets into office and then signs executive orders, which they defy, and then start acting as independent agents, essentially, which you look at what's happening in Texas with the Biden CBP versus Texas State Guard. Imagine that under Donald Trump. Texas is going to be more reserved. They're conservative, so things kind of go to standstill. But what happens when Democrats just say, we will do whatever we want with impunity, and then Donald Trump has to counter that? I think the evidence suggests that Donald Trump will do nothing based on what we saw in his first term. So it may just be then that the federal government effectively collapses. So I'll put it this way. In a scenario where Trump wins and blue states begin to defy federal authority, in the event that Trump does nothing and just says, well, the states won't listen, then the federal government is just basically gone. And so you're opening up the door to, with weakened federal authority, not necessarily a civil war, but regional dissolution of the United States, similar to the Soviet Union.
And everyone claiming that they're a sanctuary state and immune from federal regulation. And
that's just it. I mean, when California starts letting in infinite, just unlimited illegal immigrants because they want to, right. And then Congress, when we do the census and then figure out how many congressional seats are in California, but California is like, we no longer abide by federal authority. So, however, we're going to send people to Congress to influence other states. You're going to have a major constitutional crisis. In the scenario where Donald Trump says, iron fist time, we're invoking the Insurrection Act and calling upon the National Guards of surrounding states to stop the crimes committed by California, well, then California either resists or doesn't. Then you might have occupation, the federal government occupying California to stop the illegal immigration, or you get resistance, and which is the beginning of civil war. No idea.
So instead of civil war, we're at civil strife right now. Civil strife. And I asked that question because when you consider the record of Tim Walz, he passed laws in his state where if a parent doesn't trans their kid, the state can take the child from the parent. Could it be that we are seeing a neo-style of civil war, whereas there are no physical casualties at this moment?
There are.
And who?
Aaron Danielson was shot twice in the chest by Michael Reinhold in Portland. Walking down the street, Reinhold with the BLM the communist fist just shot him twice in the chest.
So we're at
30 plus people died.
We're at civil war then?
Civil strife includes political violence.
Okay.
So Bleeding Kansas, for instance, John Brown walks up to a guy and just shot him in the face. Him and his kids were going around and they were just they were like, God's mandate, slavery must be ended. They didn't care and they were going to use violence to get it. And no surprise, the guy was hanged for treason, for deciding that he would use murder to get his way. And civil war, man, I mean, especially with the issue of slavery, you get to this point where there's no real easy way to defend any of this.
Right.
Like, am I going to defend a guy who decided to take it upon himself to just go murder someone? That being said, the guy was a slave owner, right? The moral questions are challenging. I usually default to don't be violent. That's where we are right now in this country and where we want to be, because we don't want this devolving into something substantially worse. But you mentioned the transing of the kids. I said this, I thought abortion might be a catalyst for civil war, because the scenario I imagined is like a man and a woman get pregnant in Oklahoma. After 6 months, the woman is like, this guy is not right for me. I can't be with him for whatever reason. And so in the middle of the night, she packs her stuff and she flees to Colorado for an abortion. The man, at 6 months, Well, yeah. I mean, Colorado has abortion at the point
Colorado
of
will
birth.
do it, but it's just so horrifying.
Right. And so imagine she's saying to herself, if I have this kid, I'm trapped with this man for the rest of my life, and he's the wrong guy. He's bad. He's a bad guy. So then what happens when that guy wakes up and says, where's my wife? Searches around, she's gone. And he's like, that's my child. And at 6 months, he's viable. She doesn't need to kill him. And so he calls her, where are you? And she's like, I'm leaving you and I'm going to Colorado. I'm getting an abortion. And he begs her, please, please, I will never see you again, but don't kill my child. And so then he calls the state. The state says she's attempting to commit a crime because Oklahoma has banned this. And she's currently actively fleeing to Colorado. Colorado lets her in and says sanctuary, she can get the abortion. Now you've got a very serious dispute. I don't know that this would actually be the case because unborn babies can't defend themselves.
True.
One of the issues of the Civil War is that slaves were trying to escape. And they were fighting for their freedom, which was so long as there were independent human beings with their own volition to fight for their freedom, you had a fighting force that was always going to exist. Babies aren't going to do that. But I wonder about the parents of children who are being kidnapped and sterilized. Because you've got Washington, Minnesota. A lot of these states are passing
California.
they're passing these laws where a third party.
Massachusetts, New York.
I think it was Washington where they said a third party could take a child to get sterilized and they would not prosecute the third party. So a groomer online can tell a kid, get on the bus and come here and we'll get you everything you need, and the state will not hold them accountable. That's the issue where the actual fighting force would be the parents of the child who want to see that kid protected. Again, I don't actually know that that's a catalyst either. It seems like what we're looking at is more like Spain or Russia with tribal hatred. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what the issue is. It doesn't matter what the moral cause is. The Democrats just hate Donald Trump. They hate his supporters. It doesn't matter what the policies are. They will vote for hatred and nothing else. And that is a person that can't be reasoned with. And that's what I fear would actually kick off more violence. Like, why did Michael Reinold kill Aaron Danielson? Literally no reason.
Thanks for watching this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to check out the live show Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. on this channel. Subscribe and we'll see you all there.